So we're live now.
Okay. So I want to thank everyone that is watching this table talk. And today's table talk is surrounding the power of the Black vote. I am going to allow a couple minutes for individuals that do want to log on and view this live so they're not missing any information. All right, so for those, if this is your first time joining the Table Talks, my name is Dominique Goodman, the founder of Correctional Views, and I have aligned with Advanced Carolina to promote education between the Black and the white community as far as what's going on in America and just removing, dumb perceptions that people hold not having truth behind, their beliefs. And so today we are speaking about the power of the Black vote, because even though we are, the Black community, we do still hold different perceptions. We do still hold different values, and we still hold different levels of degrees of truth of how effective our, the power behind our vote is and how we actually make it more impactful. And so before we begin our conversation, I do want to let everybody on the panel go ahead and introduce themselves. And everybody that is watching, just to remind you, you do have the opportunity to engage with all the panelists. There's a question and answer box at the bottom. And if you have a question, you can go ahead and submit it and we will address it during our conversation. So you guys can begin to introduce yourself.
All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Christopher Neal. I am an Aggie. Met some of these lovely people at A&T. I have very strong background in political politics. My father's a town councilman in North Carolina. My mom actually ran for office in the early 80s as a town council woman. And, I have a lot of aspirations with politics. Is one of my, side hustles I do. Prior military, and just looking to get the voice heard for all of us and get better for my kids.
Awesome.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Danielle Brown. I am the North Carolina Black Voters Matter state coordinator. I am also the A. Philip Randolph Institute national organizer, and I have my own organization by the name of Impact, and everything has to do with voting. My goal is ultimately to ensure that we as Black people are not subjected to the voter suppression that is constantly put before us, and to ensure that our votes are counted and that we are not just utilized as a number when we go to the polls, but we are utilized as part of the process.
Peace, everyone. My name is Shay Harris. I live and work in Washington, D.C. My title is Policy Advisor, and I work for local government here. I'm excited to join this conversation. I'm also an Aggie, and my first job out of college was actually with Common Cause, North Carolina, where I was the HBCU campus coordinator. And so we worked on gerrymandering, we worked on get out the vote, and equal distribution of funds for HBCUs in the state of North Carolina. And so this conversation is very dear to my heart. I think of myself as an activist and understand and firmly believe that part of the strategy in Black liberation has to deal with how we vote. And there's power in voting. It's not the end all be all, but it absolutely has to be part of the strategy. So I'm excited about tonight's conversation.
My name is Alan Holmes, and like Chris and Shay said, I'm an Aggie as well. I work currently as a senior advisor for Atlanta City Council member Dustin Hillis, but on the side, I also do political consulting through a company called Roadmap Advisors, and we're very passionate about working with people who want to run for judge, who want to run for sheriff, who want to run for district attorney in these races to really solve some of the problems that we see pop up every other day, it seems. So I'm passionate about public service, but also just trying to figure out how we can use leverage and how people can use leverage to I guess, get the change that they need on the local level in a lot of these positions that have power over how the criminal justice system operates. So I look forward to this discussion, and also just getting a better understanding so that people can do all they can to avoid being disenfranchised, and we can keep fighting so that everyone who wants to vote can vote without any issues.
Awesome. And I just want to thank you all again for attending this panel. We do know the impact and the importance that it has, and we want to continue to promote, positive messages regarding this topic. But just to go back just a little bit. So what we're discovering right now is there's a lot of information and there's a lot of history that people are not aware of. And so there might be the typical person that says, well, the 15th Amendment granted, African Americans the right to vote, but they granted the rights for Black men to vote. And then you have to represent time periods of the 1950s and 60s during, the height of the Jim Crow era, where you have systematic, racism put into the voting polls, to where you have these literacy tests that are being provided to individuals. And that's supposed to qualify you to see how eligible you are to vote. And, so they're given to the white community as well. However, the Black community, their questions are altered. And in some questions, irregardless of how they respond to it, it's going to be the wrong answer and you can't vote. You are going to have phrases that have to be stated to see if you're able to read and, speak correctly so you can vote. A white person will be given a one sentence. However, then a Black person will be provided a section 236 and you have to read the entire paragraph. You mess one word, you can't vote. And so we see in the beginning, the initial struggle of how we were not able to effectively vote and use our numbers. What would you say right now would be the biggest systematic, structure set up to hold the Black vote back in 2020?
For me, honestly, it would have to be what Ms. Harris is working against is gerrymandering. That is how I see it, and from what just aspects of my father's time when he's running for town council and just working with the political communities in Franklin County, Wake County, and things like that. If you don't, the North Carolina state legislature was actually ruled against it with the Supreme Court because of gerrymandering, where they'd have more Democratic votes and more people voting Democrat, but yes, less representatives in the United States Congress. And it was on a 2-to-1 flip. So in most of those areas, what they did was they grouped a majority of the Black community under one congressman or one legislator. And this is a problem because now, okay, even if we do go out and vote, hey, my vote only counts in this area. So it only goes to this representative. It doesn't affect what other counties, which would normally my vote should be in, it doesn't have any role in there. So on a national level, the gerrymandering for both parties or just gerrymandering in period is a big issue toward the Black community. And we have to understand what's going on and also do the census. Now it's 2020. This is a very big year for the census. That funding that does representatives, local communities, this is all very big and we need our voice. So that's one step, and also understanding gerrymandering.
Okay. And people located in other areas, what would you say the biggest setback is with the Black community where you are?
I would say right now would be, from what I'm seeing across the nation, is COVID-19. Surprise, surprise. We all knew, as organizers, as activists, we all knew that at some point in time, COVID-19 would be utilized as a form of voter suppression. And it has been, we are seeing that. If Georgia didn't teach us anything, if Kentucky didn't teach us anything, we're seeing this. We're literally seeing how you have one polling place that's open for the entire Black community of an area. We're seeing how polling places are closed with no notice, no nothing. That's just, oh, we're closed because of COVID-19. It is literally being used as the one thing that we tried our hardest not for it to be utilized as. And we tried to inform people, please, please, please keep your ear to the ground, know what's going on, know what decisions are being made, in the dark, because we go to bed with one thing and we wake up with something completely different. And it always affects us as Black people. It affects our communities. You literally close polling places that are in walking distance for some people. People can literally walk down the street to their polling place, and a lot of them do just that. You close polling places that are that have been in these communities for so long. People, everybody knows when people are coming, what day such and such is coming. You literally are taking away something that is prevalent to our community, and you're doing it all in the name of a pandemic. And is that strategic? Absolutely. We take away their polling places, they get frustrated and they're not coming to vote. Yeah, because we take away their polling places. We know they don't have a driver's license, so they're not going to come across town to go vote. We limit how many people can come in at a particular time, which is what we need to be doing because we are practicing, physical distancing. But at the same time, you also try to shorten the hours. None of this makes any sense whatsoever when you're talking about our communities. We've always taken that hit. We've always taken the hit where we're the first ones where people we're the first ones that you come to as a politician when you want our vote. We're the first community that you're coming to, but we're also the first community that you take everything away from. So is it, again, strategic? Absolutely. COVID-19, just another excuse for us to be able to utilize in 2020 for us not to be able to utilize our voices as voters at the polls.
Yeah, I was actually on a live call with Kiana Johnson, and she had just received her ballot in the mail, and she's located in PG County, and everything was in Spanish, everything. And so she called in live and she's like, yo, why? I just received everything. The instructions are written in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. She knows what to do and how to fill it out, but she's speaking for the individuals that don't know, anything with the system. So she's asking them directly, why is this the case? She said, oh, it was a mistake with our vendor who sent it. We're working on that. How do you make a mistake as far as language when you're in a county where that's not the predominant language spoken in PG County? And, that wouldn't be like a common misconception. Like in, the DC area, Shay, are there other items like this that happen, like targeted towards the Black community?
Yeah, great question. I would echo everything that's already been said as it relates to COVID-19 and gerrymandering. I think DC is a little different, as we often are, because we're not a state. And so we pay some of the highest taxes in the country and yet have no representation. So as it relates specifically to the Black community, I will say that I think we do a great job in terms of allowing people to vote. When people are released from incarceration, their voting rights are immediately restored. And even if you're locked up in the DC jail, you're allowed to vote if you haven't been convicted. And there's actually a bill before council right now that will hopefully allow people that are serving sentences all across the country, because again, we're not a state. And so when people are locked up serving time in DC, they're sent to Federal Bureau of Prisons. So people are sent all across the country, unfortunately. But this bill would allow them to absentee vote even while they're incarcerated. So some of the things that we're seeing across the country, we don't necessarily see here, but one of the biggest things is that, again, we pay some of the highest taxes and don't have representation. And there was just recently a House vote where statehood was actually approved in terms of it passing the House. Now, it will not likely pass Senate. But even that's a good signal. But until we're a state and we have the full rights of states, I think we're going to continue to see certain issues that, other places just don't experience.
Okay. Well, I would understand that, just especially like focusing on the fact that, DC is not a state. And I know that that's like the big fight right now to attain that right for that area. But just hopping down to like the area of Georgia right now, because Georgia's been on the topic, like the media, for like a realm of different reasons right now. And so just, Alan, like speak to me about exactly what's going on around the community with it in this regard.
So I would say as far as some of the biggest issues with Georgia and Atlanta, as far as voting is concerned, come down to, as many of you all know, the Secretary of State. So there was a lot of issues with the voting equipment that they decided to pay for and I guess utilize for every county in Georgia. And one of the biggest things that we saw in the primary about a month ago is that because of COVID-19, as Danielle talked about, a lot of poll workers called out. And it was like a perfect storm where there was not enough poll workers to service all of the polling places in the city of Atlanta for sure, and also in other areas of Georgia. So what they did was they had to shut the polling places down, which made people have to wait for hours in a lot of different polling places. I know I looked at some data, and a professor from UCLA analyzed 10 million smartphones and 93,000 polling places on voting on election day, not in Georgia, but all across the country. They found that voters in black neighborhoods had 29% of voters in black neighborhoods had to wait longer to vote, and 74% of black polling places were likely to wait more than a half an hour to vote. So you see, from looking at the numbers, that if you live in communities that are majority black, it's a given that you're going to wait longer. And a lot of this had to do with the issues with the polling places. But I think one thing that hopefully is being looked at to improve this and to fix that is that we need to have more people in general step up and volunteer to work at a polling place, because Fulton County is actually pays people to work. And so we need to see if we can get companies, organizations, nonprofits. We need to get a lot more people besides elderly people to volunteer. Because one thing I also heard about is the people who still did volunteer and didn't call out because of COVID-19 concerns. Some of these people are not tech savvy. And so they were getting very confused with how to operate the machines, even simple things that they should have been able to fix. They weren't able to fix. And so they had to call somebody from the Board of Elections, and then that delayed the voting. And so we need more younger people to volunteer to work at polling places in November. But we need people who are kind of tech savvy enough that they can troubleshoot problems that may arise with the equipment, because confusion also leads to it taking longer for people to vote. So that was something that definitely we saw happen in Atlanta, and that's something that has to be fixed by November for sure.
To piggyback off Alan, I live just south of the airport, so we're still in Fulton County. My polling area, well, we had issues. Like you said, it's typically elderly people who normally work the election facilities. And I was talking to one of the ladies where she's like, a lot of them called out because they were scared of COVID. So, like you said, it was a myriad of, all kinds of factors. Equipment not working, not enough staffing, not enough, and then you had people who waiting in line. Like I literally waited 3 hours. I was off, so I had time that day. But a lot of people who have to go to work, they can't make it in there. And then if they got childcare, they can't, it's hard. All of those issues arise. So you'll have people, I can't wait 4 hours in line to vote. I want to vote. I'll stand here for an hour and a half, but I got to go. I got to go get paid. So that was one of the biggest issues with one of the polling areas where I vote. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was like, well, high schools teach civics. So I feel like maybe we could get when we talked to Alan about Fulton County. Hey, we bust some of these high school seniors and juniors to go work the polling at, because most schools now require volunteer hours. Those weeks beforehand, ship them there, get them trained. Man, a high school student could have fixed some of the machines in like 10 seconds with the way they're tech savvy now. So it just gives you, now you have more bodies. It's a learning experience, and because you get them more involved in it at a younger age, because a lot of times in our community, we don't get involved in politics. It's not something that is talked about in our communities, our households, and things on a regular basis. I was very involved because my mom got a couple of arrest records from the civil rights movement. So it's just one of those things that we just have where you talk about it. In the Black communities and stuff, if we start getting them involved earlier, they'll have more of a voice. They'll be able to talk. They'll be able to run for office. They'll figure out more things and help, then turn around and help their community also.
Okay, so I mean that's a very good point. And like me with politics, I entered college and Barack Obama's running. Okay, we have to go vote, and then attending an HBCU, A&T, number one. I'll always say it. You know, everybody was engaged to vote at that time. Like, Alan, you remember how like exciting the movement was. It was like everybody was like, you know, we get to vote this year and we get to push a Black president. But there's even other stats like 2012, like the turnout of Black voters, that was the first time that exceeded the amount of white voters. And 66.6% of eligible Black voters turned out just to reelect Barack Obama. So they had to sit up there, they had a cause, they had motive, they had push. What we know the push right now is we need Trump out this office. However, at the same right, you still have the Black, you know, community that's mad. They're not, you know, the fan of Joe Biden right now. So it's like you have a lot of people saying like, you know, I don't want to vote for Trump or I don't want to vote for Biden either. And then you have this this random man, he's not random, Kanye West now saying, hey, I'm running for election now. How do we actually formulate a way to make it digestible to individuals to realize how impactful their vote is this year and what it would mean to them if you feel like, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to vote for them, I'm going to vote for West. How does this really like affect us still? Because I don't feel that everyone has a grasp that understanding.
I think honestly, as much momentum as we are a people of momentum. When we want to do something, we do it. When we want something to happen, we make it happen. I think one of the biggest things that we have to do is no matter what election it is, whether it's a presidential election, whether it's, you know, a congressional election, whether it's the mayor or what, we have to learn to put as much momentum, if not more, into those elections that we did into the Barack Obama election. Because we saw what we could do. It's proven what we could do. But I also believe too that we have to also make it mean something to people. It has to bring it to their level. One of the things that I'm not a fan of people. I know you have certain organizations that nobody moves in these towns until somebody brings you that sample ballot that's already marked and you telling you who you going to vote for or whatever. I tell people all the time, you know, if Miss Mamie passed away tomorrow, who's going to bring you that? You know, who's gonna tell you who to vote for? You know, that type of thing. We have to learn to teach people to make it their own. It's your vote. What matters, what's happening on my side of town may not be happening on Chris's side of town. It could be a completely different thing. So for me to say, oh, here, Chris, here, go over here and vote for this person over here, that person may not have whatsoever, may not mean anything to his community. We have to learn to teach people and educate them to line it up with what's going on in their communities. And we have to put as much momentum behind it as possible when we're talking about our local races, when we're talking about the races that are state races, when we're talking about our state legislators, things of that, we've got to teach people and teach people about those offices and what they do. And then we have to teach them how to line that person up with what's going on in their community and make it mean something for them. I tell people all the time, when you start talking about people's kids, I used to work in HR, so I know this. You talk about people's kids and their money, you got a problem. So when you start putting some political aspects in there about some money and some kids, you will see a huge difference. And oh, I didn't know that they were coming after my school system like that. I didn't know this person didn't vote this way when it came to my community and my kids' school. I didn't know that this person said, oh, we should we should lock people up for X, Y, and Z. I didn't know that when you start making it mean something on the ground level to people, you start seeing a different reaction. You start seeing some momentum come behind it, and you start seeing people start asking more questions and want to be more involved. We have to do a better job of educating people. We have so many people that are out here that says, you know, they'll be like, well, the city council needs to do this, or the city council needs to do that. Honey, that ain't for the city council to do. That's for the county commissioner. But again, people don't know or understand the differences. They're used to getting that piece of paper that has people march and says, hey, look, this is who you go vote for. But again, Miss Mamie ain't gonna be here forever. So we have to learn to do that for ourselves and make it mean something to ourselves and our own communities.
Yep, make it tangible. So, definitely agree with everything you said. It's like, and the education part is, like you said, because until I really started getting into it, once I got to A&T, I didn't know what a county commissioner was. I didn't know, what the city council could do and what they couldn't do. What's in the jurisdiction of the mayor. Those type of things should be taught in civics, but they're not. So it's based on our community to show things and then make it tangible to, like you said, if it's coming from my school system, I got kids. Oh yeah, I'm gonna pay more attention to it. You coming for my money? I'm coming. We're gonna have some problems. So I get it. And that's the hardest part for us, is to make it tangible to the community where we understand it. That's like with these police brutalities, it's something that we can see. A lot of us have felt this before. A lot of us have, I'm in law enforcement. I still get scared when I see blue lights behind me. I ain't even speaking. So it's just those tangible aspects of in my life, how, I can relate to it. So that's, those are the type of things, once we get to a level where we can do that with our community, about voting, about what things people do, what positions they are, you'll start seeing more of an outcome and more that is sustaining that momentum.
And I wanted to hop in too and just say that one thing that we're going to have to do, especially with people voting consistently, and now that we have an election coming up, is to do voter education and make sure that it's ongoing. A lot of organizations, a lot of campaigns, they swoop in 4, 5, 6 months before an election, hit you. They didn't come to check up on you before. They didn't come into your neighborhood before. They didn't get to know you before to see what your issues were and to develop a relationship with you. But they expect you to vote when they just delude you with Facebook, Instagram ads, and direct mail and radio ads. And they wonder why sometimes people don't turn out. So I feel like we definitely have to change the model in terms of, there just needs to be ongoing education where we meet people where they are, who don't know anything about politics. Instead of talking, we just need to listen in terms of what their issues are, maybe what they're confused about, what they're frustrated about with politicians, which makes them not want to vote. It has to be like, I think some people just need to understand it. This is like a long-term relationship building type of thing. We don't trust people don't normally trust someone who just swoops in off the street and tries to sell them something. You have to have built up some trust. Like most people don't get married after dating for 1 week. You might be in a relationship for 3 or 4 years. You might be engaged for another year. The trust has to be built up. So a lot of people in general just don't have trust, which is understandable. So I think we just need to have ongoing education. But also, as more people are understanding that our conditions as Black people have not improved, it's on the politicians themselves to go bold and be willing to push for the policy that we need to improve our lives. Because I think a lot of times some politicians don't think that people understand how bad it is, or they don't think that people know that their lives haven't changed. Maybe they voted for President Obama twice and that literally nothing has improved about their life. And so, it's also incumbent on the Joe Bidens of the world to go bold with policy. And I think I don't know about everybody else on the call, but I'm a firm supporter of reparations and of really going bold with respect to the policies that one would be willing to roll out for Black people. Because at this point, the reason that the push is even happening, in my opinion, is that our condition has not improved. tangibly, individually it has, because we know a lot of success stories of people who are Black who are doing well. But collectively, if you look at the numbers, the gap is still 11 to 14 trillion dollars between Black and white wealth. If you look at from '05 to '09, the median wealth of Black people dropped 53%. A lot of that wealth was never recovered. If you look at some other data I was looking at, single white parents have more than 2 times the wealth at median at 35,000, as do married Black parents at $16,000. And white women between the age of 21 and 29 who have a college degree have a net worth of about 3,400. Black women between 21 and 29 who have similar education and have a net worth of negative $1,000. Negative $1,000. And so a lot of this isn't because we don't work hard and we're not trying. It goes back to the systematic issues that were never addressed. So I think that the reason that you see some of these discussions happening regarding a little bit more, asking for more at we as a people, why reparations is being brought up, is because we have to see a return on our investment for voting. You know, I've never missed an election, but at the same time, I understand the frustrations that people have who may have voted and not seen an improvement in their life. So I think politicians have to be unafraid of going bold to get people out, because again, until the situation's improved, that's going to be a problem.
Well, so I will speak on like my behalf, because you're saying, you know, everyone, you know, needs to be identified and educate themselves. This is a long-term relationship, and, you know, we have to begin to trust one another. You talk about, you know, the data points of, you know, how the difference between, you know, the Black and white community, as far as, you know, finances are concerned as well. But like, what about the large group of Americans, Black Americans, that no longer even have a voice to vote? So myself, I am listed as a felon. I cannot vote. However, I work, I still pay taxes. My taxes are going to politicians that don't even technically represent me. So how does that impact, you know, society? Because, you know, I can sit up here and I can continue to advocate. I can continue to highlight, you know, the needs of, you know, felons in America. I can continue to tell you how being a felon has affected the Black community in America. But if I can't even vote for your platform, who am I depending on to make those changes?
Yeah, it's a big point because unfortunately, a lot of African Americans have been locked up, disproportionately more than white Americans have been locked up, and not getting that back, that right that you're supposed to have in the Constitution is a big hindrance, because, you know, everybody makes mistakes. You do things happen. If you pay the time, you didn't, and you're a positive to society, you should be granted that right that you are given from the day you were born. When you turn 18, you have that right. If as long as you meet those requirements, you should still be able to get it. And again, that is I think that's a political tactic for keeping African Americans down, because it is used mainly on us. Now, granted, yes, white Americans get their felonies, but it's not to the same extent as African Americans who are incarcerated for a bogus marijuana charge, who had 3 blunts and now they're doing 4 years. Like, it's a very disproportionate number, and that is a huge number of African Americans who should be able to voice their opinion and who would have influence in the political community. Like, even in their locals, their local communities, all of those things. Heck, they should still be able to run for office, but they won't be able to. Just depending on the state they live in. So,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I think that, and that's why, Dominic, I think that, and I know some people, I'm not saying that we don't need to ignore what's happening in DC, but that's why I'm so obsessed with like state and local politics, is that to answer your question in regards to how we can get to the point of what was passed in Florida, where felons were, well, they're fighting it still, where felons, a lot of them were finally granted the right to vote. That has to be an initiative that begins on the state level. And we have to continue to push and almost be obsessed with getting the right politicians in office on the state level so that some of these laws can change. I think the momentum is there. I think, unfortunately, even though the ballot amendment passed in Florida, you still have politicians in Florida who are pretty much making felons pay a tax
Mhm.
to still be able to vote. So they're fighting that in the court, even though the voters overwhelmingly supported giving people with a criminal background in Florida the right to vote. So I think we have to be obsessed with focusing on state politics to change the laws. I think everybody always wants to focus on what's happening in DC, and I get it with Trump and everything like that and trying to get the Senate under control, but we have to get these state legislatures in the right hands. We have to get the governors elected who want to push for things like this in different states. And also we have to have people who are willing to fund efforts like this, because actually John Morgan, the lawyer, was the one who funded, I believe, spent a lot of money on the initiative in the organization, which pushed to get felons to be able to have the right to vote. So we have to have heavily funded efforts that are pushing that too.
If I can just jump in, I want to challenge us on language. I think language is very important. And so I think what we're primarily talking about is formerly incarcerated people or returning citizens. And so I just want to caution us to not use language, negative language. So I personally hate no, it's all good. I personally hate the word felon and refuse to use it. Dominique, you can refer to yourself however you want. I'm not going to infringe on you on that, but I just want to challenge us as we're talking about policies to make sure that we're centering people in our language. So as it relates to returning citizens, I would agree with what Alan said and also add that I think it's both and not either or, right? I think that there does need to be bold legislation and a policy initiative that allows formerly incarcerated people to vote upon their release. And as I mentioned earlier in DC, we're even looking at how people that are currently incarcerated can vote because, I believe that you should never lose your right to vote. And I know there are going to be people along that spectrum, but Alan, as we talk about bold initiatives, I think that some of that has to come federally, right? But in addition to that, I think absolutely we focus way too much about what's happening at 1600 Pennsylvania, not understanding that your local and state elections are going to influence and have an impact on your day-to-day life way more than whoever sits in that seat will ever have. So I think part of it too is educating people. Some people don't even know here in DC that once they're released, they have the right to vote. And we have one of the most generous policies, right, in the country. And I still talk to people on a regular basis in my interactions that don't even know that they have the right to vote. So part of it is education and making sure people that do have the right to vote know about it. But also beyond that, it's also organizing, as the other panelists have said, and making sure that, Dominique, as you mentioned, that's your right. And there are, I'm sure, other like-minded people in respective states that want to fight for that policy. And so part of it is understanding, I know in the District of Columbia, we have over 70,000 formerly incarcerated people. That voting block alone could change any election here. And I would venture to say that's similar in different states as well. And so part of it too is a value proposition. People understand, if they don't understand anything else, politicians and politics understand people and they understand money. And so I think part of the strategy has to be to organize formerly incarcerated people to demand that they have their rights back.
And I agree. And I just want to address the comment that was made in the chat stating that, if you are no longer on parole or probation, you automatically get your rights restored. And a lot of people don't know that. That's not the truth. So that's going to be dependent on what state you are in. So me, myself, I acquired my charge in the state of Arizona. I acquired 2 charges at the same time: aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and aggravated assault in endangerment. Because I have that second charge, when I come off of probation, I don't automatically have my rights restored. I have to request through the courts that I can have my rights restored. And it is then up to the courts to decide if they're going to allow me to vote again. And so, like we were speaking offline prior to the conversation, those are different. Like Shay just mentioned, in DC, you walk out, you can vote today. dependent on the state you are in, you're going to have different, variances on, your eligibility to vote. It does come with education in your state. I do encourage everyone who does, hold something on their record to look that up and do not go off of the he say, she say of someone you heard saying that you cannot vote. You may be able to. You just need to look into your local rules and restrictions. Definitely not vote and get in trouble if you're not able to, because we don't have time for that.
I'll also say this. I mean, one of the things we have to be more vigilant about is undoing the systematic voter suppression that is given to returning citizens. I have been in spaces where I have literally people that want to argue with me about, I mean, they've been off probation, they've been off everything here in North Carolina for years. I mean, I'm not talking about like months. I'm talking about 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And they're like, no, I can't. Oh, I'm not doing that. No, I can't. No, I mean, they are arguing with me about their rights. And it's because it's been embedded in them for so long through probation officers, through anybody that's been around them. Don't do that. Don't do that. You're going to go back to, to jail if you do that. Don't do, you don't have any voting rights. Yes, you do. And for some individuals, they don't understand that because they're wanting not to make any type of mistakes. And so we have to take a little bit more time and say, and I completely agree with Shay in saying that we have to take a little bit more time to organize returning citizens and educating them as well as others on what these rights are. And what you can and cannot do. We at Black Voters Matter, we talk 365, APRI 365, Impact 365. This is not a election. I hate election when people say election season. That irks my nerves. And the reason being is because there's no such thing as election season. You have individuals that are planning to run for office already within the next 2 to 4 years. In North Carolina, we have an election every year. So we've got people that's been planning their election 2 years ago. They've been raising money for their elections 2 years ago. Historically, when we talk about Black people getting, Black people understanding what it means to be a part of an election, we used to have, back in the day, you had churches, you had Black lawyers, you had Black businesses, Black communities that all contributed to pushing somebody financially when they were talking about running for an office. Why? Because they came from that community. They knew them. They got their hair cut with them every Saturday. They sat with them in church on Sunday. They ate dinner with their families at cookouts. These are people that people pushed. Why did they push those people? One, because they knew them. They spoke the same language, but they also knew the people that were running. The politicians knew the plight of the people. So they took that and they ran with all of that. So when we talk about that and we talk about getting to, when we talk about the presidential election, okay, yeah, whatever. Yeah. That's just me. That's how I feel about it at this point, because it's a distraction. To me, like Alan was saying, we need to focus on local elections. Some of these local offices that we've had mayors that have been in offices for 20 and 30 years, and you have done absolutely nothing, but you have your community, which is a rural community, is like what 70-80% Black, but we have a mayor and a city council that's been sitting there for 20-30 years. For what? You ain't done nothing. I'm just saying. If we focus more on the rural areas and we focus on getting people in some of these places, that's part of the reason why people get so afraid of rural areas, because they know when people come out and they vote in these rural areas, they can flip states. They literally can flip states. And when you go into the backwoods and start knocking on people's doors and people are like, hey, look, oh my good. I mean, yeah. It's having conversation and it not being one of those conversations where I just see you every couple of years or whatever. No, you're actually a part of the community. I love my rural communities. Honey, they feed me macaroni and cheese. They they're all about, oh, you in town, come over here. But it takes at you building that relationship with them. And I promise you, if anybody on here were to call and say, hey, look, I'm going to such and such county, I'm gonna be like, well, you need to talk to this person right here, because you can't get past this person and get in here without this. And tell them I sent you, because if you just go on your own, you on your own. Literally, you're on your own. Because it takes that type of relationship to build. People are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and they're tired of people coming in trying to tell them how to run their communities when they've been doing it all along. The only time you come in is every 3 to 4 years when you want something.
Yep.
People are tired of that.
Yep. And if people's conditions had improved, that'd be a different story. But again, every article we keep seeing about who's been impacted by the COVID-19 mortality rates, which businesses aren't getting the loans, it seems to always come back to Black people. So we're running out of excuses to give people when they say, well, I voted for him and I voted for him. They were all Democrats. Yeah, we know the Republicans aren't doing anything, but my life did not improve. So that's why we have to vote, but we also have to make sure we continue to push our elected officials to really respond. Because one thing I'll add is we can't assume that they're going to fight for us. We kind of have to force the issue, because with the last round or the second round of stimulus money that came out to small businesses, when Representative Ayanna Pressley was talking on the House floor, that's when I learned that they had a restriction. If you were a business owner who was a returning citizen who had gotten in trouble within 1 to 5 years, you could not get funding. If you were on parole, you could not get funding, even if you had a successful business, whatever that may be. And we know there's a lot of returning citizens who have become entrepreneurs because every other door is closed. Why is it that nobody was fighting for them and said, we won't sign the stimulus bill until you allow returning citizens who have businesses to be able to apply? They couldn't even finish the application. I talked to some of them. They couldn't even, once they put in their history, they could not finish the application. So this round that they're working on now, they corrected that. But I think it was because, some criminal justice groups were pushing for that change. But why did we have to push for that? It's like, why is it people weren't naturally fighting for that? Yeah.
I'm sorry. They didn't expect anybody to make a big fuss about that, because those returning citizens don't have a voice.
Yeah.
And they're not you said 70,000 people, or I'm sorry, Shay said there were 70,000 people in DC. If that same 70,000 people were in Georgia, I guarantee you, if they had the right to vote and they used that voice, those citizens would have that they would have made enough noise in Georgia to get things rolling. But nobody thinks about it. They're basically considered, I hate to say it, secondary citizens to people who aren't, have a criminal record. And it could be the stupidest thing they did in high school, or, like I've had through my job, I found a guy, he was 19, but he got a statutory rape charge 15 years ago. He's still dealing with that headache. 15 years ago, and the statutory rape was his girlfriend was 16 when he turned 19. So her parents filed charges on him. She was white, he was Black. So, it just ruined this man's life. Luckily, he's a good business mind and he started his own business. But these are the type of things, those, the returning citizens are considered secondary. Nobody really cares about it enough, especially on the federal level.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is, you are pushed into a level of being a second-class citizen, and you are not provided like equal rights. You are not easily provided a lot of equal rights. And, to this day, you still have many organizations promoting the education to rectify a lot of these situations, especially within that community of coming out, of being incarcerated and having things on your record that are never going to go away.
I'll say this, that one of the reasons too is if you have 75,000 individuals in a state, that changes the whole ball game and narrative, point blank, period. So why would I, if I know for a fact I have 75,000 individuals that today their voting rights can be restored, they can go, they can vote, and they're gonna go vote, like we know for a fact they are headed to the polls in droves, then why would I, on their brain cell, not mine, on their brain cells, why would I ultimately say, here you go? I mean, because ultimately right now, that's a form of saying, you know what? As long as you guys, as long as you are not educated about it, as long as you don't know about it, and as long as you are sitting over here in this little corner as a secondary citizen over here, I don't have to worry about anything when it comes to me being reelected or that there of the difference. So it's a strategy. It's another form. Again, I hate using the term, but I gotta use it. It is another form of voter suppression in all tactics, in any way, shape, form, or fashion. When you talk about how, how does this reflect the power of the vote? When you can organize 75,000 individuals, 60,000 individuals, and flip an entire state, that's powerful. That is the reason why they are fighting tooth and nail in Florida right now. This should have been passed. This should have been done. If ands, buts about it. We've fought. We've done everything under the sun, but we are still going to court and spending billions and billions of dollars fighting over what? Something that is simplistic. Something that is our given right. Well, not our given right, because we know for a fact that nothing was given like that. So, but at the same time, they know for a fact what that power means. When we talk about the power of the vote and what that power means, this is what it means. It means that we have such a huge dynamic of people that will literally take something and change it. And they know that, and they know how impactful that really will be. And they make it so bad they can see it. Yep. That's what makes it so bad. They can actually see it, and it scares the crap out of them.
And so, but my biggest thing was, so we all know the power that we hold. We all know when we come together to push for something to change, we witness the change almost immediately. However, there's a lot of things that will not happen until everyone is directly impacted by in some realms of what we're fighting for. How are we able to push the message if you have, like, let's say Ashley chilling in Georgia, she doesn't have any real issues. She doesn't care about voting because nothing is personally affecting her. COVID, she good. She hasn't lost anybody. Her family is fine. Nobody has gone to prison. Everybody in her eyes, her views, has their rights. This is not that serious. How are we pushing this information to those individuals in their bubbles and letting them know how powerful their vote is right now?
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
Life is the best teacher in my book. I've learned, sometimes it made me straighten out my ways. Hey, I could have been in parole, had a crime and conviction and things that I got away with. But it's just some of those things. It's like, until life humbles you or something it truly affects you, I can throw all the information towards you. Clearly, we're seeing statistics about people dying about COVID, but everybody's out there mad because they got to wear a mask. Heck, even in Atlanta last weekend, they had a pool party. 400 people were at that pool party. Like, people know this information, but until it truly affects them, unfortunately, it's like hitting a brick wall, especially with young adults also, because we haven't experienced enough. No, I shouldn't say that. Some of us haven't experienced enough where we can understand how much power we have, what this information it is, and decipher that information from all of the fake news, the fake noise, everything out there, and make our own intelligent decision.
Yeah, and I'm hopeful, Dominic. I don't know if, I guess it's hard to answer your question, but what I would say is that everything that's been happening after the energy that we see after what happened with George Floyd, as we see so many younger people younger than all of us on this call who are just getting out there, marching, wanting to be involved. I hope this kind of provides momentum to get people engaged and put for the change. I think that one thing that it'll be interesting to see, and I talked to somebody about this, is that in many of our cities, Shay, where you at in DC and in Atlanta, and even rural and small towns, until the percentage of younger voters increases, it's going to be very hard for us to get to the place we need to, especially on these criminal justice issues. I love the energy that I've been seeing from the protests, from the marches that we've all been to, which needs to continue. But also on the same token, I'm only speaking for the city of Atlanta. A majority of the voters in the communities where I work and communities that are 70 to 90% Black in the city of Atlanta, the majority of the voters are elderly. They have a very different view on criminal justice issues. And this is an interesting dynamic, is that I'm bold. Shay, you're bold. Everybody on this call is bold in terms of some of the changes that we want to see. But I'm some of the 75, 80-year-old men and women who live in Center Hill and Bankhead where I work, and they really have a different outlook on this. Like one lady was like, so the young kids, they're still protesting, huh? But like the way she said it, it was like, oh, okay, when is this gonna be over? Like, so nobody's gonna save us, is what I tell people. Like, I think there's this notion that an older voter will just wake up one day and have the same views as somebody who's 22 who's been protesting and marching. That's not gonna happen. A lot of the older voters are set in their ways, and I'm not here to say what I think they should do. I've seen it happen in Atlanta. But there's enough younger people who, if we actually care about them and engage them, eventually they'll turn out to vote. It doesn't happen quickly, but if we build that relationship, engage them, and if the percentage of younger voters increases, we'll see some change. If not, it's going to be a little longer for us to get the change.
And so we do have a question from the panelists, and they're wanting to know, like, what platform actually presents the evidence of the power of the vote at state and federal levels?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
What platform presents evidence of the power of the Black vote at state level and federal levels?
I'll take it. Here in North Carolina, there's a small town, Black Voters Matter came in contact with. This small town is called Plymouth, North Carolina. This is a local election, not a state or federal, but it is a local election. And because I deal a lot more with local than I do a lot of times with the state, and a lot of it's by choice. But here in this small town, where they had a sitting mayor that was there for 20-something years. They had a city council that was majority white for many, many years. But this past election, they were able to get their first Black mayor. And this, mind you, this is a town that is 75% Black. So they were able to get their first Black mayor. They were also able to get their first majority city council Black. All of this had to do with the fact that they went and they were knocking on some doors, and this pre-COVID-19. That's it. Let me make that clear. That they were knocking on doors, making phone calls. They were doing everything that they needed to do because they wanted change. I have another rural area that when you look at the vote and you look at the power of the vote, we had somebody running for mayor and they lost by one vote. 88-89. This is how small the town is, number one. But they have 500 people there. If only, really, I tell people, if only another 10 people had come out and voted, because you never know what somebody's going to come into or whatever. Somebody can be turned away for anything in today's time. But if they had 10 more people that just would have came in and voted that particular day, this person could have won. This Black person could have won. So when we talk about the power of the vote, you look at it at all forms. You look at it on the local level, you look at it on the state level, you look at it on the federal level, you look at it on all forms of how big of a difference that could make. Again, 75,000 individuals that their voting rights can be restored. that can literally flip a state. Being optimistic that you don't even need, and I'm not taking away from anybody, but you don't even need all 75,000 of them. Here in the state of North Carolina, the sitting governor only won by 13,000 votes. Let's be realistic. So when we talk about the power of the vote and we talk about, returning citizens, we talk about the Black community, and we talk about pushing individuals in the way that they should go vote, we're talking about something that's very tangible and very doable. And again, have seen it happen on more than one occasion, whether it's been on the losing side or whether it's been on the winning side. Yes, a lot of it has been on local levels, but again, when you talk about states and you talk about federal, you need to start looking at some of the rural areas, some of the smaller, places where people get lost at, where there's no signal. Trust me, I've been there. When you got to let somebody know, hey, look, I'm going here today and I should be back by this particular time. Those are, you start talking about those places. You start digging into those places and talking to those communities, and you can see how they can flip a state legislator seat. You can start seeing how they can flip a governor's seat. You can start seeing how they can flip all the local office seats. But we have to be more strategic about the way that we go about it. I heard Chris say that, his parents, both of them ran for office. That didn't happen. They didn't win by chance. They won because they got out there and they were talking to people that they knew would support them, and they knew that they had their best interests at heart. So when we're talking about the power of the vote, again, we have to bring it back down to people's level and meet people where they are, so that people understand what the vote truly means to them and their community and what they're going through in their own lifestyles.
Yeah, if I can just quickly jump in and add, and I'm not sure I'm going to fully answer the question because I'm not sure I fully understand and appreciate it, but I think it's critically important to meet people where they are, as Danielle already said, but in addition to that, understanding the issues that are going to impact people's day-to-day life. I think those, in my experience, have been where I've seen the biggest turnout and people really, galvanizing and going after something, is when the issues are made tangible and made plain and simple, to where people understand, okay, if I do X, this is the outcome that I can anticipate, or if I vote for X. I also think it's important to start focusing more on issues and not on people. I think especially in the Black community, we get very caught up on names, and once again, the incumbent has been in now for 2 decades, that name recognition, we just don't keep voting for them, right? Because they have a D after their name. And we really need to look at people and their track record on issues that are important to us, and start organizing, I think, people around issues and less so around people. I think that's important. And then just quickly, Dominique, to your question, which I think was an excellent question, for all the Ashleys in the world, right, that don't necessarily understand how their vote is impactful or why it matters. I think that's just reality. And I think that we can't focus solely on the Ashleys and lose sight of the fact that all movements started with a very small amount of people. And the Ashleys of the world, hopefully, right, we pray that they eventually come along, and that doesn't mean that we stop trying to engage them or build relationship with them, but you have to find the people that are really ready to do the work and be about the work of the people and move from there. It doesn't take masses. As Danielle said, their last election in North Carolina, 13,000 people. That's not a lot of people. And in DC, elections are often decided with less than 5,000 people. So it doesn't take, the thousands that we think about the civil rights movement. We think, it was hundreds of thousands of people. Sure, in some small instances, but the Montgomery bus boycott started with a small amount of people that were serious about economic justice. And I would say, just a closing thought around the question, I think as we look forward, issues around economic justice, as Alan already talked about, reparations and the like, are hopefully what I am hopeful that will encourage Black people to be serious about voting as part of a strategy, because we have a long way to go. And I'm not sure at this point, even with reparations, that we ever recover what's owed to us in this country. But I think if we're not laser focused on economic justice and what that means for the Black community, then we're going to continue to be at a deficit.
Yeah, and I wanted to add too, Dominic, about what you were saying with the power of the Black vote. Just look at the 2016 election for the guest on this chat who asked the question about the power of the Black vote. In Wisconsin, between the last time President Obama ran for re-election and when Hillary ran, Black voter turnout dropped 19%. Trump only won Wisconsin by 23,000 votes. There's your margin right there. You could say that about some of the other states that he barely won. But with that said, I'm one of those people that doesn't necessarily blame the voters. I personally think that people who run for office, it's on them to get the voters out. They are making the pitch. They are in charge of going bold, and it's on them to get people out, because as we all know, some people win and some people figure it out. Some candidates run for office and lose. There are some people who are good at this and there are some people who are bad at this. So I do think people should vote, but it's on the elected official and the candidate to be human, to be relatable, to not show up on people's doorstep 2 months before an election and actually care and be genuine, but actually be willing to improve some lives, like Shay said, around issues. So I think mainly I put it on the politician. Don't blame the person who's not voting. Tangible. I mean, this is like if you own stocks. This is an investment. If a voter has invested year after year and their life hasn't improved, just like if you invest in a stock and you see no return, some people,
they pull out.
Yep.
And so I think that we have to understand that that's just what it is. We have to show improvement or the stock will be sold, which means people are not going to vote. I can't see Black people voting Republican. I'm not saying that's what they should do, but they're just not going to vote. Some won't unless we improve.
True.
So even when we're able to improve, our vote, when do we begin to, push the element of what happens after I submit my ballot? Because, you have to consider your IG voters. Yo, I just went and voted. I got my sticker. I'm cute, I just stood out here. Black Lives Matter. Like, I'm for the movement. They're just going to be that momentary things. Like, there's so many things that have to happen after election, like after that person has been elected, after that person is sitting in office. Like, where are you holding a person accountable? And who do you guys feel the accountability should be held on? Like us as voters, or, somebody that's hired to make sure the person is doing their job?
That's a great question. I think the accountability is everyone has to be held accountable. Community has to hold each other accountable. Black people, we have to do a better job of holding each other accountable. And absolutely, if you elect somebody to an office, you absolutely hold them accountable because you voted for them based on something that they said that you felt they were going to fulfill or change. And if they're not doing it, it's time to hold them accountable. So in DC, whether, we're not a state, so we don't have a governor, but we have 13 council members, right? And we have a mayor. And so like we have local ANC, which is the Advisory Neighborhood Commission. So you have to dig in and figure out what makes sense for you. But I loved your point, Dominique, like it can't just be doing it for the gram. Like, my God, I think that's great. Like, welcome to the movement. I'm so excited to see people like digging in and marching, but the performative activism, not gonna get us to liberation. And so I think it's, yes, get in and like vote, absolutely. But understand, as Danielle said, it's not just you checking off a list of a ballot that's already been like written out for you. It's understanding, okay, well, if I vote for a judge, what does that mean? If I'm voting for a county commissioner, whatever it is, like really understanding what is it you're even voting for, and what is it the outcome that you want this elected official to have. And accountability, I think, looks different depending on where you are, but the bare minimum is keeping up to see if they're fulfilling the promises that they came to you and said they were going to do. And if they're not, then it's time for them to go. And you vote, right, you vote them out. And so I think the accountability, again, it has to be across the board, but part of it is being accountable to yourself. So you have to educate yourself and understanding it's not just that you voted, it's being an educated voter. What did you vote on? And then not only just expecting like your elected officials to change the status quo, that's not just on them. And candidly, most of that's not going to happen from your elected officials. And so again, you are the, as Alan said, no one's coming to save us, period. And so what is it that you're passionate about and that you're committed to seeing through? And then it's maybe you running for office, and it doesn't have to be a high elected position. Maybe it's your school board if you have children. Maybe, there is no shortage of leadership needed in all of our communities, but it's figuring out what makes sense for you, what you can commit to, and then be about what you say you're about.
As much as we put into GOTV, like we put thousands of dollars into these into organizations to just give rides to the polls. I'm not even talking about anything else. Let me take rides to the polls. As much as we put into rides to the polls, why can't we do the same for rides to city council meetings? Exactly. Rides to commissioner meetings, rides to school board meetings. Why can't we do the same type of thing, that as much work as we do on the front end for Get Out to Vote? Why can't we do the same thing when it comes to voter accountability? A lot of the reason why we have some of the situations that we have is because we have people that don't attend. Me personally, it has been a breath of fresh air to be able to attend some of these city council meetings across the state of North Carolina via Zoom. Some of them are pretty hilarious. I'm just saying, I mean, if you want a good laugh, some of them are pretty good. But at the same time, to hear the things that are coming down the line that they're talking about that affect the citizens of those communities is unreal. It's like, how did this even come to you? And then y'all have the nerve to talk about it and want to vote about it. And it's like, it don't make sense. But there's nobody in the room that says it doesn't make sense.
That's not true.
Yeah.
Because I forced myself into some rooms. So what I have been doing is I've been forcing myself at tables that I have not been invited to. And
but
so
you're the difference. You're the difference to the
No, but I just want to let people know that it can be done, because if y'all gonna get my tax dollars and I still can't vote for y'all, we still gonna have some conversations.
Oh, yeah.
So, I wasn't, I've never been in trouble in North Carolina. I don't know, what individuals go through when they're released from prison. I don't know, the systematic, oppression behind closed doors, but I'm learning. I've become involved in some meetings with the Reentry Committee Council, and I speak to them. Where is this information online? Oh, it's not online. Where do you get this information? Well, it's so much information. Did you hire someone to create it? It's not that hard. I just made a website last week. Y'all need help? And they have all these reasons and excuses of why they can't promote needed information to individuals that are hurt right now. Oh, well, people, they were in prison. They might not have access to a phone. I'm pretty sure a lot of them may not have access to that, but they have access to places that can provide that for them, especially at this point.
And that's you.
Pre-COVID, but
And that's you holding them accountable. And that's you taking your time and holding them accountable. But how many more Dominiques do we have other than the core group of us, the people that do this on a day-to-day basis? How many more do we have that do that? We have a lot of people when it comes to accountability. They're good. They're great when it comes to let's get out here and let's go vote. They're great at going to vote, but that accountability piece gets left off every single time. And then when it gets left off, everybody's looking at each other like, well, who's supposed to say this and who's supposed to hold this person? It's like Shay said, it's everybody's job. It's not just one person's job, it's everybody's job. And we have to be able to, as much as we put into one, that piece right there needs to be put 3 times more into that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
every single time.
Yeah, and I wanted to add, as far as accountability is concerned too, I think some of it is from my standpoint of working in the city council office in Atlanta is sometimes it's not that the council member doesn't want to do something. It's just that they're dealing with 80 other things. So if you have a good idea and you are willing to write the legislation, a draft of it, you willing to do all the legwork, it's increasingly likely that the council member may be willing to push that if you as an advocate do a lot of the legwork. And that's what I tell people. Don't just call your council member and email them with an idea and think you're just going to take 5 minutes to email them. You didn't do any more hard work and you just want them to do all the work. There's 80 other people who had another idea that they want the council member to work on. But if you actually say, oh, I drafted this legislation, it's not perfect, but here it is on reforming the criminal justice issue, they're more likely to look at it because half the work has been done. They still have to introduce the legislation, but you've helped them because as far as in Atlanta with ending cash bail, a lot of people don't know that the reason that it got to the point where the mayor signed it and the city council members voted was that there were like 8 criminal justice reform groups that worked together. They drafted the legislation. They pulled all this data. They met with each of the city council members saying, all right, after this meeting, we need to meet y'all again in 2 weeks. This is what we expect. If we don't hear from you, we're going to call you 80 times. Then you need to let us know when you're going to introduce. Like, they had timelines and they did so much of the heavy lifting. They didn't wait on the council members to do anything. They kind of did the work, said we're going to hold y'all accountable and we're pushing for this to be introduced. And eventually it got introduced. The mayor was on board with it, but it helped that the organizations did so much of the legwork. It's just like I tell people, council offices are small. We only have 3 people in our office, and we can only do so much because I do 15 different things for the office besides legislation. So when community groups have an idea, come with the whole thing, because a lot of times it might actually happen when you actually come with everything to the table instead of just tweeting your council member or sending them a message yelling at them and then that's it. Just try to kind of go past that, put in some more work, and then a lot of times change is more possible that way.
And one of the key things that you said was working together.
Yeah.
You know, there's too many of us out here, like, you know, we're saturated when it comes to nonprofits and organizations and things. We are like, a dime a dozen. I mean, you see us on every corner. But the key thing is when we work together, we initiate the change that is needed and that we're wanting to see. We are the ones that, you know, can pull it together and say, hey, look, okay, I got this over here. I may not speak to this right here, but I know that you speak to this, Dominique. I may not speak to this piece over here, but I know you speak to this, Chris. You know, that type of thing, when you were working together instead of working separately. Everybody, you know, yeah, we understand that there's limited funding out here and everybody's fighting over the same crumbs of funding that gets generated to everybody. But when it's all said and done, if we really want strategic change, it's not about the crumbs. It's not about the funding. It's not about that. It's about us coming together and working together to pull together a voting power that is so dramatic and so huge that people won't know what to do with. They really don't know what to do with it. But we're standing together and we're doing it together. So when you come for one, you're coming for everybody.
No, and I understand that the power in the movement. Sorry, I died for a second. I understand this power, but I just want to, you know, we have like a short amount of time left, but I want to like finalize and get everybody's last thoughts of, you know, increasing our impact in voting, you know, and how this like truly affects change. Like, how do you feel that we're possibly able to like heighten and leverage the power that we hold and, you know, make the greatest change for, especially after the way 2020 has been going right now, to where we're able to, you know, kind of like liberate ourselves for true freedom. How do you feel that we do this?
Man, that is a tough question. First, we got to realize the momentum that we have at this moment. We have, with the police brutality, with a lot of stuff, Black Lives Matter, it's a lot of stuff going on right now that we have the momentum. And I feel like for us to keep this going, we have to understand it and like she said, Danielle said, come together and figure out what is the best way, like what's next, because that's always the next question. What is next? We got this far. What's the next step? What is it that we want? We have to keep moving forward. And then, in my opinion, it's always going to start with us, like-minded people, reaching back to the youth and to returning citizens to educate them, meaning sitting down having a conversation or just taking them and showing them how to do the process, and we'll continue this momentum forward.
Yeah, that's a loaded question, but I'll take a stab at it as we get ready to close out. I think, yeah, we have tremendous momentum right now. And so I think, what's the collective action? And it, again, is going to look different in DC than it does in North Carolina. Certainly, I think reparations should be at the top of the list for Black people in general. But the policies at the local level and even at the state level, for those that are state, the policy agenda should look different because there are different issues that are impacting people's day-to-day lives. So I think it's figuring that out, bringing people collectively together to then effectuate change, and also understanding that we have a tremendous amount of power, and it's on us to empower those that are most impacted by all of the various issues, to bring them along and allow them to be the narrators of their own stories. I think, you know, it's false of us to say that we have to educate people. Sure, that is a component of it. But a lot of people, it's not that they're miseducated, it's that they unfortunately have been silenced. And so how do we as Black people ensure that we are empowering people that may not have gone to college, right? That may not have had the same lived experiences or the privileges that we've had, but that doesn't mean that their experience is not important, and it doesn't mean that they should not be heard. So I think if we really are serious about change, it's really how do we empower those most impacted and marginalized, and amplifying their voice and building collective power around them. Because when you get the Ashleys of the world involved, right? When we figure out what it is that's going to move Ashley to go vote and to start taking things seriously, that's when things are really going to change. So thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to continuing the dialogue.
Yes, and so Alan and Danielle, you didn't answer quick enough, so now you have a different question that you have to tackle as we close out. We had a last question from a chat room, and they said, how do we educate the importance of each vote at each level? Some people don't even know what a council member does, or a state senator, or a House of Representative. Who educates who? Who educates who has the power to address issues at different levels? Most people don't vote because they don't even know the process. How are we providing information to just educate the process?
As far as, I think one way that we can do that is based on some of the things that have been happening in society over the last, it's been happening for many years. Just in the last 6 months, we need to use the specific issues that have happened in our country and relate it back to the elected official that has the power to change that or to do more. So a lot of people don't know what a sheriff does. But if we explain to people that when a city like Baltimore or a city like Chicago or even Atlanta has issues with police brutality, a sheriff has the power to take over a criminal investigation of any city department that was within that county. So if the investigation is not going well, if it looks like it's going to be siding with the officer, or if it's going to look like it's going to be siding with the person who was disenfranchised or had issues, a sheriff has the power to step in. So we can explain to people, when you see something on TV, on Facebook, when you see some brutality that has happened, and you see your local police department dragging its feet, or you see it looks like that there's not going to be charged or nothing's going to happen, a sheriff can step in. This is one big thing that a sheriff does. I think a lot of people now, everybody's focused on criminal justice issues, so we need to relate it back to specific injustices that we all know are happening and who's involved. When it comes to how somebody's going to be held accountable, the district attorney makes that decision. who is going to be charged. Who is going to be charged? How hard are they going to go with the charge? That is the power of the district attorney. I think we just have to relate it back to the viral videos, the things that everyone is seeing on TV, because some people just don't make the connection. But we just need to make the connection for them, because I didn't even know all the powers of a sheriff until one of my friends who was going to run explained it to me just a few years ago. I mean, I knew in general what a sheriff does, but a sheriff is very powerful. So I think what we need to do is just in a way that is relatable and not boring. We have to think outside the box with it, but I think we just need to take some of the situations that have happened and relate it back to who has the power to change those things.
I read something on social media. Actually, I found it. It said of the 37 states, and this was as of July the 3rd at 9 a.m. As of the 37 states that painted Black Lives Matter on their streets, only one state ended qualified immunity. You know, when only one. You know, we got 37 states that are out here that have said Black Lives Matter or have painted it in some way, shape, form, or fashion. But what does that truly really mean? What does that truly mean when we're talking about educating our communities on who does what? You know, how do we relate that? How do we take this moment in now of the now and make it something that's beyond the now? I'm great for the now. I'm happy to see the paintings. I'm happy to see the, you know, the people protesting and marching and stuff like that. But when it's all said and done, what does this look like long term? Who do we have in office that's really going to stand up for those 3 words of Black Lives Matter? Who's doing that? Who are we electing into those offices? And to educate our communities on what those offices mean and what they do, what they bring to the table, what kind of power they have, is something that is beyond needed. When I have a niece and a nephew that, you know, when they like to do, you know, the matching games, you know, as kids, we always like to do, you know, things that match or whatever. We got to start taking little things like that and implementing it into our day-to-day conversation of, let's match this person and this person. It's not dumbing it down or anything like that. It's bringing it to reality of what we are going through on a day-to-day basis when it comes to Black people, Black communities, and Black Lives Matter. You can't just say those 3 words and think that there's nothing else that comes behind it. You can't paint those 3 words and think there's nothing else that comes behind it. When we're talking about that, we have to have this is a continuous conversation. This is not just the moment of now. And then it's taking education and wrapping it into this conversation and saying, hey, look, do you know what your sheriff does? Do you know what your city council member does? Do you know what your county commissioner does? Do you know that who says that we can paint this in the street? See what I'm saying? So, because that has to go through, that can't just be done. It's got to go through the right channels in order for it to be done. If not, it's considered vandalism. So we've got to be strategic about it and start taking everything now, the things that are going now, and thinking about what that looks like long term. And part of that long term is education. It is saying, let's match this up with this person. Let's take our issues and match it up with this person and what they're doing and what their role is and what they're supposed to be doing. And then taking it an even step further and holding them accountable once they are elected into the office. Once we've elected them into office, now you have me to answer to. Why? Because I pay you salary for that little bit. It might not be a lot, but I'm still paying you. So, and I want to see what my money's worth and what's coming out of it. And then we also have to be strategic in bringing people that don't necessarily have these opportunities, bring them to the table and say, hey, look, you know what? I have Dominique wants me to do a panel tonight, but I'm kind of busy. Can you handle it? Why? Because you already speak to this and you're in the rural area and I think you do a great job. Bringing somebody else to the table and allowing them to speak to what they know and to what they do in their community. We are never going to get anywhere any further if it's just the core group. The core group has to grow. And we have to, and the education has to grow. In order for us to do that, we've got to start bringing these people to the table, not be gatekeepers and say, hey, look, this is what's going on over here. And you will find a lot of times people, the reason why they don't participate is because they haven't been asked. And we want to start asking people and making sure that they're at the table and build the politicians and build the activists that we know are out there and say, hey, give them that platform to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And we may find our next city council person right here on this call. We may find our next mayor. We may find our next sheriff. You know, Chris might be like, oh yeah, I think I'm gonna run next year. Hey, I'm just saying, I'm throwing it out there, who knows? But we may have that right here, but we will never know that if we don't bring people to the table, educate them, allow them to line up the issues that they have in their communities with the right people, with the right, and also with who they stand for as well.
Yep, and the last thing I say is we just have to be open to all types of content that just like what we're doing, video content in creative ways to reach people. Because one big thing about the judges that I ran into, it was 1 million judges I had to vote for in this election for Fulton County. I think it was the same for Chris, where you are too. And all the judges, I researched all of them. They all had resumes. They all were a part of every legal organization, went to this law school or that law school, had the model family, but I couldn't find specific information on them beyond the resume. They're all qualified. And it was funny. It's like, I'm like, somebody needs to do a YouTube video where they see if some of these judicial candidates will hook themselves up to a lie detector test so we can see how they felt about the Rodney King verdict, how they felt about, like, because I want to know a judge who's running for judge, where is your mindset when that kid comes before your courtroom who you could give 10 years to, but you also could give them probation? Like, what will you like? And like, what's your mindset? Like, so I feel like some of the content that hopefully a lot of creatives and people eventually produce can be in a way that is funny, but can get to more answers that people are wanting to know. Because I hope somebody I voted for isn't tough on crime. I did as much research as I could. I really did, but it's like I could not figure it out with some of the candidates. And so I feel like there needs to be a way for us to really understand what these candidates are about, like their philosophy beyond the experience. So hopefully that type of stuff is pushed, and maybe some of the candidates will be open to some sort of an exercise like that so we can understand what they're really about.
I'm looking forward to actually having, continuing this conversation. Like I was telling you all before, I was running hard against politics, but I know that I have to align with it now. And so maybe in the future, pulling some people up, having conversations with it, continuing, maybe to have conversations with you all to see like the progress, what's happening in your cities, what do we still need to do, what needs to be placed, what are things that need attention right now, because this isn't just a one conversation jog where we talked about it and it's over. We have to keep in continuing this fight. And so once again, I just want to thank everybody on the panel for coming out and speaking tonight, and you will hear from me again, and we hopefully will have this conversation really soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
You guys have a wonderful night.